Hey everybody, KMO here at the dog park, and a couple pieces of information, media that I want to bring your attention to. First is a talk by Scott Galloway, and I'm not going to really get into the specifics of his talk other than just one general point that he made, which is this: that the news, the further out you pull back, the better the news gets. So, the news for the past, say, half century is pretty good news. The U.S. and Soviet Union resolved the Cold War without a nuclear exchange. That's pretty much, the big news of the last half century, and it's good news. Pull back even more, like to the last century, and technology and the spread of democracy and spread of capitalism has lifted hundreds of millions of people out of poverty and created a global middle class. Now that global middle class, particularly here in the U.S., is backsliding a bit right now. But in general, over a 100-year time span, things are a lot better now than they were 100 years ago. Now, you can argue that quality of life has been disrupted, and that the current arrangements are not as they don't answer to our quality of life needs like the arrangements of 100 years ago. Yeah, I agree. But just in terms of genuine material prosperity, things are way better now. The news is good. But if you need a headline every day, well, if it bleeds, it leads. Bad news travels fast. All those, what's the word I'm looking for? Nostrums is what comes to mind. But there's a better word that it's eluding me. Anyway, so says Scott Galloway, used to be, when we were in the pre-internet, pre-cable days, or, early cable days, really there was 3 networks, and they had a 22-minute news program, once a day. And so you could still have some pretty good news. Didn't all have to be, just bleeding headlines. But when you have news updated on your phone every 7 seconds, well, that's going to prejudice every aspect of the news gathering and distribution apparatus to favor bad news or catastrophic predictions, or just to instill paranoia or anxiety, because that's what's going to get your attention. And when the news comes that often, it's not about keeping you informed. It's about keeping you engaged. Now, that's my lingo. That's not his lingo, but I think that's pretty much what he was talking about. Now, the other thing I want to point out is Mustafa Suleyman, who's the CEO of Inflection.ai. That's the company that makes Pi. He had an editorial on the Time website. I don't know if it ran in the magazine, but it's definitely on the website. Link in the description below. You can go and read it. It's pretty short. It's something you can knock out in like 5 minutes. It's not it's not a big commitment. And what he says in that is, how do I want to focus it? First, this will be controversial or provocative to my longtime audience members. He says that artificial intelligence, no surprise, but also synthetic biology, quantum computing, and new abundant sources of energy. That's the part that I think that would be provocative to my longtime peeps who've been with me since the peak oil days. That all of this is going to create an enormous redistribution of power, and that the people who are poised to lose the most are the ones who have the most right now. Now, he's not saying that it's going to bring on this era of, equality and egalitarianism and widely enjoyed, fairly spread out prosperity. No, he's just saying there's going to be a shuffling of the people who are the extreme winners. And I'm maybe reading more into that than he's actually communicating. You can go and read it and judge for yourself, but that's the message I took from it. And he says that in Silicon Valley, they've long practiced, we'll say, not necessarily intentionally, but a psychological coping mechanism that I think he calls pessimism denial, or pessimism avoidance. Pessimism avoidanceism, something like that. And he says basically the leaders in Silicon Valley have long practiced this very cavalier methodology of move fast and break things and don't worry too much about, the long-term consequences of that methodology, and just not even really considering the downsides. And now with AI, and particularly with the large language models that really make it seem like there's somebody there. Because there could be amazing advances in AI, but if normal, non-technical people never interacted with them, they could fly under the radar for years, and most people would never know, and if you told them, they wouldn't believe you, or they wouldn't care. It just wouldn't seem relevant to them. But since everybody can talk to these large language models and really see how far they've come in how short a time, you could say that, and I'm coming around to the idea that these things have, they're the canary in the coal mine, but they're also an enormous benefit. And you can say the canary in the coal mine is an enormous benefit, because when the canary drops dead, you know to get out, because it is more susceptible to those toxic gas buildups than you are, but you're not immune, so when you see the canary succumb, it's time to move. So yeah, these things are kind of like the canary in the coal mine, in that processes which could have run largely undetected and really unremarked upon by most people for a very long time, are now more likely to have the the disinfectant of sunshine shined on them early and often, and with a lot more people paying attention. But Suleyman says that this sort of willful, not ignorance, but just willful indifference to the dangers of this technology, which has been the norm in Silicon Valley for the last couple of decades, well, now that spell has broken and people are worried. But they're kind of worried about the wrong thing. They're worried about losing their monopolies. They're worried about losing their positions of privilege and power. They're not seemingly worried enough about the potential consequences for all of us. But the thing that I want to end on is nothing new at all. This is a very old piece of tech wisdom. And it is the idea that we really overestimate the effects, the transformational effects of new technologies in the short term, and we dramatically underestimate them in the long term. We can see potential applications, and we can see this is the low-hanging fruit, this is what's going to happen pretty soon. But pretty soon, if you're watching it, it's the watch pot never boils kind of thing. Pretty soon takes a long time to roll around if you're waiting for it. Whereas, the cumulative long-term effects that interact with other things that maybe you're not monitoring so much, or you don't see the obvious connections, but they do, connections do happen, and they do produce amazing knock-on effects over time. That's kind of just a function of our limited imagination, or our limited ability to keep, a great number of variables in mind at once, just, in our forecasting functions. And so, yeah, in the long term, we really, really fail the test of imagination, or, of prescience. But in the short term, we expect too much. And I think that's totally, on display right here now. But it is a little bit different now in that, AI is demonstrating lots of emergent abilities, things that it was not optimized for, things that its own creators were surprised by. And that kind of upsets the apple cart of, expecting too much in the short term and not enough in the long term. Now, we're going to be taken by surprise in the short term by things that we didn't realize were coming or didn't imagine. But I really wish I could subscribe to a sort of just Panglossian optimism that says, oh no, the end of material want for everybody is coming, the end of frustration and feeling disregarded and powerless, or feeling irrelevant, that this is going to come to an end very soon and everybody's going to live abundant, meaningful, socially gratifying existences. That's an option for everybody, but you got to work at it, and you have to know what produces it. And it's not just going with the flow and waiting for technology to fix everything. You can have amazing material abundance and still be unhappy. And I think we're going to run a cultural experiment to see just how unhappy how many people can be with such amazing abundance, unfolding all around them. All right, that is all. What do you think? Hit me up in the comments. Talk to you soon.